I still don't understand why my parents despise me. They handed my brothers $200,000, then pushed me away. I built success on my own after that, and now I'm thriving. Now they beg me for help, but now karma gets revenge for me. If you don't like it, then maybe you should leave. My father's words, cold and sharp, sliced through the air that night, a final, brutal confirmation of everything I'd always suspected. I remember the immediate chill that spread through my chest, like a block of ice had replaced my heart, cementing a decision I knew, deep down, I was always destined to make. For 27 years, my life had been a masterclass in invisibility. You see, I have two siblings, Sarah, my older sister, and Chris, my younger brother. They weren't just the favorites. They were the sun, the moon, and every star in my parents' universe. Growing up, Sarah was the perfect student, her report cards pristine, her extracurriculars a mile long. Every achievement, no matter how small, was met with rapturous applause, culminating in her acceptance to an Ivy League school. I can still recall the sound of my mother's voice, a high-pitched, almost delirious joy, echoing through the house. They threw Sarah a celebration that felt less like a party and more like a coronation, a second Christmas designed solely to honor her academic brilliance. Invitations flew out. Family members from across the country were flown in. It was an event, a declaration of pride etched into the family's history. Chris, on the other hand, never seemed to break a sweat. Life just worked for him. He coasted into a prestigious grad school, and just like with Sarah, my parents became his personal concierge service. Tuition? Covered. Moving expenses? Taken care of. A brand new laptop? On the desk the day he arrived. Everything was meticulously arranged, ensuring his path was butter smooth. And then there was me. My acceptance to a state college, a perfectly good university, mind you, was met with a polite nod and a muted, "That's great, Michael." No fanfare, no beaming photos, no celebratory dinner beyond ordering a simple takeout. The contrast was a dull ache, a constant hum beneath the surface of my consciousness. It was hard not to internalize the message. My accomplishments, while valid, were simply not worthy of the same enthusiasm. It wasn't just the attention, though. It was the financial chasm that truly separated us. Sarah's wedding, for example. $200,000. Not a typo. My parents didn't just fund it. They orchestrated a fairy tale, treating it as the social event of the decade. The venue, the catering, the designer dress, every detail was meticulously curated, every guest flown in. For Chris, it was the entirety of his graduate degree, plus rent assistance until he was financially stable. And Emily, the youngest, never had to worry about student loans. Those were simply erased, like they never existed. What did I get when I started my career and needed essential tools to even begin working? $7,000. And while $7,000 is a significant sum, when measured against the hundreds of thousands poured into my siblings' lives, it felt like a paltry crumb, a bare minimum offered just so they could claim they'd helped. It stung, a slow, festering wound that never quite healed. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. Every family dinner became a painful exercise in self-restraint. The conversation invariably revolved around Sarah's globe-trotting adventures, her high-powered job, or Chris's latest achievement, his new house, or whatever extravagant purchase they were contemplating. I'd sit there, pushing food around my plate, my jaw tight, trying desperately to conjure some anecdote from my own life that wouldn't sound utterly insignificant in comparison. What was I supposed to contribute? Hey, I just wrapped up a big project at work, and I'm still diligently paying off my car loan. My struggles, my triumphs, felt like pocket change next to their glittering fortunes. I remember one particular dinner, maybe a year ago. Sarah, ever so casually, mentioned her upcoming European vacation, funded, of course, by Mom and Dad's generous help. Chris, with a nonchalant shrug, chimed in about the ridiculous expense of his wedding that they had covered. And Emily, bless her heart, laughed about how tuition hikes meant nothing to her thanks to parental intervention. Their words, delivered with such effortless ease, felt like tiny darts piercing my skin. My face grew hot, a prickling sensation that climbed up my neck. My hands instinctively clenched under the table, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer, unacknowledged privilege. They had been handed their futures on a silver platter, while I had clawed and scraped, taking out loans, fighting for every single dollar. And the worst part? No one, not a single soul, seemed to even notice my silent rage, my growing fury. My breath hitched, and a desperate, raw sound escaped me. Must be nice. The room went silent, all eyes pivoting to me. Sarah's face contorted into a mask of bewilderment, laced with a familiar annoyance. "What's that supposed to mean, Michael?" she asked, her voice laced with incredulity, as if my frustration was an alien concept. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to tamp down the tremor in my voice, but the words tumbled out anyway. "It means that not all of us get everything handed to us on a silver platter. Some of us actually have to work for what we need." Chris, ever the dismissive one, simply shrugged, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating smirk. "Michael, you're always acting like you're the victim. Didn't Mom and Dad help you get those tools for work?" That hit a nerve, a raw, exposed nerve. Help. $7,000 felt like a pittance, an insult, compared to the lavish sums showered upon them. "Yeah, they helped," I spat, the bitterness unmistakable. "But $7,000 compared to hundreds of thousands? It's not the same, and you know it." My mother, predictably, tried to smooth things over. "Michael, we thought that's what you needed. We've always tried to give you what was fair." Fair? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. How was this fair? Fair, I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this is fair? You've given them everything, practically paved their roads for them. I've had to build mine brick by brick." The conversation unraveled into a chaotic mess of defensive retorts and accusations of me being dramatic. "You're blowing this out of proportion," my dad said, shaking his head. "We gave you what you needed." "No, I thought that's not what they gave me. They gave me the bare minimum, just enough to keep me quiet, to maintain the illusion of impartiality. They didn't care about what I wanted, only what they deemed sufficient." I couldn't take it anymore. The scrape of my chair against the floor was deafening as I stood up, abandoning my half-eaten dessert. I walked out, not looking back, their muffled voices trailing behind me like forgotten ghosts. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I stormed out, my heart hammering against my ribs, a furious drumbeat in my chest. Each step down the driveway felt like a desperate escape, the world shrinking around me. It was late, past 10, and the streets were eerily quiet, the kind of stillness that amplifies every unspoken thought. I just walked, no phone, no headphones, needing the raw, unadulterated space to think. The memories of the dinner replayed in a relentless loop. Chris's smug face, Sarah's condescending tone. They lived in a bubble of privilege, utterly oblivious to the suffocating pressure it created for me. They were a perfect, self-contained unit, and I was perpetually on the outside, peering in. The more I dwelled on it, the more my frustration curdled into a cold, hard resolve. Why hadn't I said more? Why hadn't I truly unleashed my anger? But then, a sobering realization dawned. It wouldn't have mattered. It was like talking to a brick wall. Their version of reality was impenetrable, and mine, A jarring contradiction, held no weight. What I had encountered was a classic case of emotional invalidation, a psychological defense mechanism where one person dismisses or minimizes the feelings, experiences, or thoughts of another. In this family dynamic, my parents and siblings had consistently negated my emotional reality, telling me I was dramatic or overreacting. This isn't just hurtful. It can be profoundly damaging to a person's self-worth, making them question their own perceptions and potentially leading to feelings of profound isolation and chronic resentment. I ended up at an old park from my childhood, a hidden bench by some trees, a sanctuary for lost kids and frustrated adults. Staring up at the vast, star-strewn sky, I usually found peace, but tonight, it offered no solace. All I could feel was the searing injustice of it all, the years of trying to measure up, only to be left with scraps. My phone buzzed. Emily. Michael, where did you go? We need to talk about this. Talk. I scoffed internally. Talking never fixed anything. It was always the same old script. My parents explaining away their actions, and me being told to just accept it. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to deal with Emily, or any of them. Not yet. The chill of the autumn night seeped into my bones, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. The thought of returning home, of facing them after such a volcanic eruption, felt unbearable. Emily called again, her name flashing on the screen. A part of me, a tiny, hopeful flicker, wondered if she finally got it. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Michael, where are you? Her voice was calm, but threaded with that familiar, grating air of superiority. Doesn't matter, I replied, my voice flat. I'm not coming back tonight. Come on, you're being ridiculous. We're family, we need to talk this out, she said, as if it were that simple. Talk. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. You mean like we always do? Where I get told why I should be grateful for the little I get, and you all pat yourselves on the back for being such great siblings. There was a pregnant silence on the other end, a pause heavy with unspoken excuses. Look, maybe we haven't seen things from your perspective, Emily finally offered, her voice softer, a hint of genuine uncertainty in her tone. But running away like this isn't going to solve anything. This isn't about tonight, Emily, I countered, rubbing my temples, a dull throb beginning behind my eyes. This is about every time I've been left out, every time you guys got to live your best lives while I was stuck trying to make ends meet. I needed help too, and all I got was a toolbox. She didn't respond, and I could hear the faint sounds of laughter, dishes clinking in the background, a stark reminder that life inside their bubble continued, undisturbed by my pain. Just come back, she pleaded. We'll figure it out, okay? But I wasn't ready to figure anything out, not with them, not yet. I need time, I said, hanging up before she could protest, shoving my phone back into my pocket. That night, sleep was a distant dream. Back in my apartment, the weight of everything that had transpired pressed down on me. I lay in the darkness, replaying the dinner, the words, the cutting dismissiveness, trying to comprehend how my own family could be so utterly blind to years of blatant favoritism. It wasn't just a recent phenomenon. It was a deep-seated pattern, a narrative woven into the very fabric of my upbringing. Every instance I'd brushed off as no big deal had, in fact, been a brick in a wall of resentment. The truth was, I realized it wasn't solely about the money. The financial disparities certainly hurt, but they were symptoms of a deeper issue, a profound lack of recognition, a feeling of being consistently undervalued. I was the one who always had to fend for myself, to figure things out alone. I didn't necessarily crave their handouts. I craved their acknowledgement, their validation. I just wanted them to see me, to understand that my life, my needs, my dreams mattered just as much as Sarah's and Chris's. As the hours crawled by, a new feeling began to emerge, replacing the fiery anger: exhaustion. I was tired of fighting for a place in a family that seemed to have decided long ago that I wasn't worth the same attention as my siblings. When morning finally arrived, everything felt clearer, not easier, but starkly defined. They weren't going to spontaneously wake up and realize their unfairness. I had to make them see it. But how? The thought of cutting ties completely was tempting, yet a part of me resisted. As messed up as things were, they were still my family. I just wanted things to be different. Sitting on the edge of my bed, staring out at the empty street, I revisited all the times I'd tried to subtly hint at the imbalance, only to be dismissed. I hadn't been overreacting. I'd simply lacked the tools to articulate the depth of my pain. And then it hit me. The only way they would understand was if I showed them plainly and simply. Numbers don't lie, right? I needed irrefutable proof, something they couldn't dismiss as dramatic or jealous. What I was facing was an ingrained pattern of familial favoritism, which, when left unaddressed, can lead to severe long-term psychological impacts on the unfavored child. This often manifests as lower self-esteem, chronic resentment, and a relentless, often subconscious, quest for external validation, a cycle that I was now desperate to break. The rest of the morning was a blur of frantic digging. Old bank statements, faded emails, archived texts. Each document was a small, painful shard of evidence. I found emails detailing my parents' promise of a down payment for Sarah's house, only to juxtapose them with texts from my dad later that same year, stating they couldn't help me with rent due to prior commitments to Sarah. It wasn't just proof, it was like ripping open old wounds. But the pain fueled me. This wasn't just in my head. I had the receipts. My phone buzzed again, Emily, still trying to mediate. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to talk. I was preparing for battle. By late afternoon, I was mentally and emotionally drained, but I had something tangible, a carefully curated dossier of undeniable facts. It felt like a grim victory, a quiet understanding. Now they had to listen. I knew Sarah would be defensive, but I was ready. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of papers, a sense of control settling over me. I wasn't a passive recipient of their neglect anymore. I was taking charge. The upcoming family dinner for Emily's birthday loomed large. The timing was awful, yet there was never going to be a good time to detonate this emotional bomb. I wouldn't wait another year, another month, another dinner. This was it. The day of Emily's birthday dinner, my nerves were a tangled mess. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous flutter deep in my stomach. I clutched the folder beneath my arm, feeling its edges press into my side, a physical manifestation of the heavy truth it contained. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was a celebration, and I was about to ignite a firestorm. But what choice did I have? I arrived early, hoping to compose myself, to mentally rehearse my lines. My parents' house hummed with a deceptive normalcy. My mom bustled in the kitchen, adding the finishing touches to dinner, while my dad, oblivious, grilled in the backyard. Emily, engrossed in her phone on the couch, looked up, offering a casual smile. "Hey, Michael, you good?" she asked, her voice light, unaware of the approaching tempest. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah and Chris arrived soon after, their laughter echoing through the hall, seemingly unburdened by any lingering tension from our last confrontation. It was astounding, this effortless ability to simply move on. Meanwhile, I'd been carrying the weight of years, and it was finally about to explode. We sat down to eat, and for the initial 20 minutes, it was business as usual. My mom asked about work. Sarah recounted details of an upcoming vacation, and Chris made a quip about the exorbitant cost of weddings. I barely touched my food, my gaze darting between them, waiting for the opportune moment. It came after dessert, as everyone settled back, satiated and relaxed. I put my fork down, the clink echoing in the quiet. I cleared my throat, the sound feeling amplified in the silence. "I need to talk to you all," I said, my voice resonating with an authority I didn't know I possessed. Confused glances met my words. Dad raised an eyebrow, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "What's up, Michael?" I took a deep, fortifying breath, the folder now resting heavily on the table. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night, and I realized I've never truly laid it all out for you guys. I've been carrying this around for years, and it's time I showed you why I feel the way I do." Mom looked worried, her eyes flitting to the folder. "Michael, can't we just enjoy the evening? It's Emily's birthday." "I know," I interrupted, resisting the familiar pang of guilt. "And I'm sorry, but there's never going to be a good time for this. I need you all to listen." I stood, walked to the living room, and connected my laptop to the TV. Their eyes followed my every move as I navigated to the presentation, a stark, factual slideshow of numbers, dates, and scanned documents. The first slide was a simple chart: family educational investment. Sarah's name sat at the top, then Chris, then Emily. My name was at the bottom, the number beside it embarrassingly low compared to theirs. "What's this?" Chris asked, leaning forward, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "This," I stated, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "is what I've been dealing with. This is how much you spent on Sarah's college tuition. And this," I clicked, "is how much you spent on Chris's graduate degree. And here's Emily's, all her student loans covered." I paused, letting the raw figures sink in. Sarah and Chris exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one spoke. "And this," I clicked to the final slide, a solitary number stark on the screen, "is how much you gave me. $7,000 for tools. That's it. No tuition help, no house down payment, no wedding fund. Just $7,000. The room was enveloped in a suffocating silence. My mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and my dad's jaw was tight, his frown deepening. "Michael," Mom began, her voice a fragile whisper, but I cut her off. "I'm not saying you didn't help me," I clarified, striving for calm, "but you can't sit there and tell me this is fair. Look at the difference. You gave them everything they needed to get ahead, and I got leftovers." Dad sighed, leaning back, his arms crossing defensively. "We gave you what we thought you needed, Michael. You didn't ask for help with school." "I didn't ask because I knew you wouldn't offer," I retorted, the frustration boiling over. "And I shouldn't have to beg to get the same support Sarah and Chris got. You just handed it to them without a second thought." Sarah, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke, her voice laced with genuine confusion. "Michael, why are you bringing this up now? We never knew you felt this way." "Because every time I've tried to bring it up, you've all brushed me off." My voice cracked with a raw emotion. "Every time I've hinted that maybe things aren't as fair as you think, you've told me to stop being dramatic, or that I should be grateful for what I got. But it's not about the money, Sarah. It's about how you've all made me feel like I don't matter as much as you." Emily, her head bowed, mumbled, "I didn't know it was this bad, Michael." "That's the point," I exclaimed, clicking off the presentation. "None of you knew because none of you bothered to look. You were all too busy living your perfect lives, and I was just there, struggling to keep my head above water." A heavy silence descended again. My mom wiped a tear from her eye, and my dad remained grim-faced. For the first time, a sliver of hope sparked within me. Maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to understand. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said, breaking the quiet. "I just wanted you to see what I've been dealing with. I wanted you to understand why I feel the way I do." The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. No one knew what to say, and surprisingly, that was fine. I didn't need their words. I needed their recognition. My mom fidgeted, her eyes darting between my siblings and me, a silent plea for someone to diffuse the situation. My dad, still quiet, jaw clenched, seemed to be wrestling with his own internal demons. Sarah finally spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't realize it was that bad," she said, her gaze fixed on the remnants of her cake. "You didn't realize?" I challenged, a weary cynicism in my tone. "Come on, Sarah, this isn't new. I've been dropping hints for years, and every time, it got brushed aside." She offered a vague, "I don't know, I guess I don't know." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Chris, however, remained stubbornly annoyed, as if I'd personally ruined his evening with my drama. "Michael," he scoffed, "I get that you feel like you've been left out or whatever, but we all got what we needed. I mean, I worked hard too. Just because Mom and Dad helped me out doesn't mean I didn't put in the effort." That statement, so utterly lacking in self-awareness, lit a fresh fuse. "Effort? Are you serious, Chris?" I snapped, my voice trembling with indignation. "I'm not saying you didn't work hard, but you didn't have to struggle the way I did. You always had a safety net. Mom and Dad were there for you every step of the way, making sure you had everything you needed. Meanwhile, I was scraping by, trying to figure things out on my own. It's not the same, and you know it." He just shrugged, confirming my fear that he simply didn't or wouldn't get it. This kind of willful blindness is a hallmark of privileged perspectives, where individuals genuinely cannot perceive systemic advantages because their own experience lacks the struggle that would highlight those disparities. It's not necessarily malice, but a deeply ingrained inability to empathize with experiences outside their own well-cushioned reality. "It's not about effort," I continued, forcing myself to rein in my fury. "It's about how you guys got handed opportunities one never had. It's about the difference between me having to hustle just to get by while you had the luxury of focusing on your dreams without worrying about rent or bills." Emily, who had mostly been observing, finally spoke up, her voice small. "Michael, I'm sorry. I really didn't know you felt this way. I didn't even think about the money side of things." "That's the thing," I sighed. "No one thought about it because it wasn't affecting you. It's easy to ignore something when it doesn't directly impact your life." She nodded, a flicker of guilt in her eyes. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they were finally seeing it. Then, my dad cleared his throat, pulling all our attention. "Michael, your mom and we never meant to make you feel this way," he said, his voice slow, measured, as if every word was a tightrope walk. "We thought we were doing what was best for all of you." The frustration bubbled up again, but I bit my tongue. I needed to hear him out. "We gave Sarah and Chris what they needed for school, because that's what they asked for. You, on the other hand, never really asked for much. You always seemed so independent, like you didn't want our help." I stared at him, incredulous. "Dad, I didn't ask for help because every time I tried, I was told there wasn't any money left, or that you'd already done enough for me. What was the point of asking if I knew what the answer was going to be?" My mom interjected, her voice softer, tinged with a familiar plea. "Michael, we did what we thought was fair, based on what each of you needed at the time. Maybe we didn't realize the gap was so big, but we were trying to do our best." I shook my head, rubbing my temples. "It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about how I've been made to feel like the odd one out my entire life. You guys were so wrapped up in making sure Sarah and Chris were taken care of that you didn't even notice I was struggling. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was just asking to be seen. The room fell silent once more, my words hanging heavy in the air. My mom wiped at her eyes, and my dad looked older, more burdened than I'd ever seen him. Michael, we never wanted to make you feel like you didn't matter. We love you, you know that, right? He offered, his voice laced with an unfamiliar vulnerability. I nodded, but it felt hollow. I know you love me, I replied, the bitterness returning. But love isn't just about words. It's about actions. And your actions have made it pretty clear where your priorities were. Mom, her voice trembling, finally said, "We didn't mean to hurt you, Michael. We really didn't." My anger, slowly, began to recede, replaced by a dull ache in my chest. I wasn't trying to hurt them, either. I just wanted things to be different. I wanted them to truly understand. And maybe, just maybe, this conversation was the first step. Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the lingering silence. I think we need to figure out a way to make this right. It's not fair that Michael's been left out, and we can't just ignore that. Chris, though still looking somewhat recalcitrant, nodded. Yeah, maybe we can figure something out. My parents exchanged a glance, and for the first time in a very long time, it felt like we were all on the same page, or at least heading in a vaguely similar direction. I leaned back in my chair, a wave of exhaustion and a fragile sense of relief washing over me. This wouldn't fix everything, not overnight. Years of feeling like the forgotten one wouldn't simply vanish. But perhaps, just perhaps, this was the start of something better. But it wasn't. After that family dinner, after my painstakingly prepared presentation, after what I thought was a glimmer of understanding, I told them, plainly, that I'd had enough. I was done being the afterthought, done accepting less. I declared my intention to talk to the rest of our extended family, to seek their opinions, to see if anyone else had ever noticed the glaring disparities in my upbringing. That's when my father, of all people, looked at me with an icy detachment I'd never seen before. "Michael," he said, his voice flat, emotionless, "you should just be happy with what you got. If you don't like it, then maybe you should leave." His words, devoid of warmth or remorse, hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the final, undeniable truth. So I did exactly what he said. I left. Not just that night, but for good. From that moment on, I made a conscious choice to focus entirely on myself. I had spent far too much emotional energy chasing their approval, striving to be seen as an equal. It wasn't worth it. I poured every ounce of my being into my work, into building the life I wanted, unburdened by their expectations or their neglect. I knew I had potential, and I would no longer allow their indifference to hold me back. It wasn't an easy separation. Walking away from your family carries a heavy shroud of guilt, a societal expectation that you will always remain tethered. But the more distance I put between us, the more I realized the monumental amount of energy I'd been expending simply trying to win their affection. I shifted my focus entirely to my career, working grueling hours, meticulously building my skills. And, slowly but surely, it paid off. Years passed and my life transformed. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My business grew, expanding beyond anything I could have imagined. I hired employees, built a dedicated team, and the satisfaction of knowing I had built it all, brick by brick, entirely on my own, was a feeling unlike any other. This was the raw, undeniable proof of my self-worth. This process of building myself up, independent of their validation, is a classic example of self-actualization, where an individual moves past basic needs and external validation to fulfill their potential and achieve a profound sense of personal accomplishment and meaning. It's a journey often catalyzed by adversity, forcing a person to find strength and purpose within themselves. I wasn't just getting by, I was genuinely successful. The kind of success that made me look back at all those years of feeling inadequate and almost laugh at the absurdity of it all. Clients sought me out from every corner, connections materialized, doors opened that I never thought possible. In a twisted way, their rejection had propelled me forward, forcing me to prove to myself, more than anyone else, what I was truly capable of. Then, just as I was settling into this new chapter, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. We hadn't spoken much since I'd cut ties. Her name flashed on the screen, a ghost from a past I had meticulously worked to bury. I hesitated, almost letting it go to voicemail, but a perverse curiosity, a faint tremor of the old need for answers, made me pick up. "Michael, we need to meet," she said, her voice softer, almost fragile. There was an unfamiliar desperation in her tone, not the usual emotional manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. After some back and forth, we agreed on a quiet cafe. When I walked in, they were already there, hunched over a small table by the window. They looked different. Older, certainly, but more than that, they looked tired. My father, whose posture had always been one of almost arrogant confidence, was slumped, worn, his gaze distant. My mother had dark circles under her eyes, and she incessantly fiddled with her coffee cup, a nervous habit I didn't recognize. Something was profoundly off. "Thanks for coming," my mom said as I sat down. I offered only a silent nod, waiting. The awkward silence stretched, suffocating. Finally, my dad spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Your siblings, they've cut contact with us." I blinked, genuinely unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" "They don't talk to us anymore," my mom interjected, her voice shaky. "Sarah moved away with her husband, and she won't return our calls. Chris, he's distanced himself too. And Emily, we haven't heard from her in months." I sat there, processing this bombshell. It was almost unbelievable. Sarah, Chris, Emily, the golden children, the favored ones, had abandoned them. Now they were the outcasts. "We're struggling, Michael," my mom continued, her voice breaking. "Without them, we're really struggling. Financially, emotionally, everything." There it was. The real reason for the meeting. They needed help. My help. I leaned back in my chair, a tumultuous mix of emotions swirling within me. A part of me felt a cold satisfaction, a twisted sense of karma finally coming full circle. They had pushed me aside for years, ignored my pleas for support, and now they were the ones begging. The bitter irony was not lost on me. But surprisingly, I felt no triumphant glee. Instead, an overwhelming weariness settled in. I was tired of the drama, tired of the years of resentment, tired of the constant, unspoken demand to prove myself. "So, what exactly do you want from me?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We were hoping you could help us out," my dad mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "We know things haven't been great between us, but we're really in a tough spot financially, especially." There it was. The money. I should have known. I looked between them, a surreal disbelief washing over me. The very parents who had dismissed my needs, who told me to be happy with what I got, were now asking for my financial salvation because their favored children had deserted them. "I don't know," I said honestly, the words tasting like ash. "I mean, you made it pretty clear a few years ago that I wasn't your priority. And now you're asking me to help you because Sarah and Chris don't want to." They exchanged a look, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it. Regret. Real, Genuine, heartbreaking regret. We know we messed up, Michael, my mom said softly, her voice barely audible. We should have treated you better. We didn't realize it until it was too late. I said nothing. A part of me, the old, wounded part, yearned to forgive them, to be the bigger person. But the part that had spent a lifetime feeling overlooked and undervalued wasn't ready to let go of all that hurt. I'll think about it, I said, rising from the table, but I'm not making any promises. As I walked out of that cafe, the cool air biting at my cheeks, a profound realization settled over me. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I had found my own path, my own success, not because of them, but despite them. And that in itself was a victory. In your own life, when has the true cost of familial favoritism or neglect finally revealed itself? And what choices did you make when confronted with that stark reality?